Pick up a book on influence, persuasion, psychology, sales, overcoming objections. You learn all these different techniques, and then you try to execute them in real life, and they backfire on you. They don't work. You actually appear like a jerk or an idiot that people don't respect and certainly don't comply with. If this has ever happened to you, it's very likely that you're not paying attention to one or more of the 5 governing factors of influential communication. So sit down and stay tuned, because in this video, I'm going to talk about them, I'm going to reveal them, because nobody else is. So what exactly is influential communication? Influential communication is what you say with your mouth or what you do with your body that causes someone else to agree with you, to comply with you, to buy from you, or to simply get on your side. That's what influential communication is. Now, you could read every book, you can do all the research, you can go to all the different seminars and learn every technique under the sun. But the fact of the matter is, there are 5 governing factors that will ultimately dictate how successful you are when you try to influence or persuade someone else. So the first factor is your authenticity. How real are you being when you try to influence or persuade someone, or when you communicate with people? Because here's the deal. Authenticity trumps everything else, because the moment that someone feels that you're not being real with them, it's like a light switch goes off and they just turn off their mind. So the light that was on, the mind, the brain that was on, paying attention to you, listening to you, all of a sudden it goes off. And what you have then is a barrier. You have resistance. You have somebody that's looking at you as a fool. So instead of paying attention to your influential message, they're sizing up how real or how fake they think you are in their mind. And so your entire message gets destroyed. So aside from everything else, aside from anything you study, you learn, you try to execute, the number one thing that you have to be at all times is authentic. You have to actually be who you are by nature, because the moment you deviate from it, people aren't stupid. They're going to sense it and they're going to become resistant toward you. The second thing, the second governing factor, is your authority. How much perceived expertise, credibility, experience do you have on the topic at hand? So whatever it is that you're trying to get somebody else to do, whatever idea you're trying to get somebody else to believe in, the amount of authority that you have is directly correlated to how successful you will be at influencing them or persuading them on that specific idea. The more authority you have, the more perceived credibility, expertise, expert status, guru status that you have on a particular topic or subject, the more people are inclined to agree with you, respect you, listen to you, and ultimately comply with you. The third factor is your aptitude, or your actual expertise, credibility, experience, because believe it or not, your perceived expertise, ability, credibility, and your actual expertise, credibility, experience are 2 very different things. You could be extremely experienced, you could be extremely well-versed on a specific topic, but if you can't articulate that fact, if you can't create a sense of authority around that fact, then you will likely fail to the person or to the people who may be less skilled than you but can generate authority, and people who can create that powerful sense of perceived credibility. So those are 2 very different things, and you have to have both of them. I'm not saying that one is better than the other. What I'm saying is that one is actually more effective than the other, but if you combine the both of them, you become unstoppable. The fourth factor is your adaptive ability. And this is a big one that I see a lot of people completely miss the mark on. How good are you at adapting to the environment, the situation, or the context of what's going on. So a lot of times people have a message in their mind, they have an opinion, they have a point of view, they have a belief, and it could be something that they're ultra passionate about. But in the process of trying to convey that thought, idea, belief, opinion on someone, they're not paying attention to how that person's responding, how the audience is responding, what's taking place in the environment, or if the context of the situation is changing. Instead, they're just hammering their point without paying attention to those things. And when you don't pay attention to those things, you fail to pick up on signals that tell you how and if you should be changing your presentation or your communication style in any way. Now, the fifth is your articulative ability. So how good are you at articulation? Do you have a wide range of vocabulary? Do you use analogies? Do you incorporate storytelling? Do you appeal to visual thinkers, kinesthetic thinkers, auditory thinkers? And again, that circles back to the adaptive ability part of the process, because if you are truly adaptive and you pay attention to the way people are responding when you talk to them, you'll know the difference between auditory people who make sense of the world by the way they hear things, visual people who make sense of the world by the way they see things, and kinesthetic people who make sense of the world based on how things feel. If you pay attention to them, you'll see that they use something called predicates, which are basically clues that tell you what type of a thinker they are based on the vocabulary or the words that they use. So if you pay attention to that, you'll be able to adapt your communication style to them. But more importantly, you'll be able to use different techniques and strategies to articulate your point. So for example, if you were dealing with a kinesthetic person who makes decisions and makes sense of the world based on the way things feel, you would tell that person a story. You would incorporate storytelling, because storytelling is a very easy way to touch somebody emotionally. Or you could use an analogy. If you were dealing with a visual person who makes sense of the world based on the way things look, you could paint a picture for them. You could show them proven case studies on paper and let them visually see what you're talking about. The point is that after assessing your ability to adapt, you have to be able to articulate your point. So, what are some things that you can do right now to start working on these things? So the first thing you got to do is you have to find your authentic and professional balance. Your authentic and your professional balance. So what I mean by that is oftentimes I see people that are either at one extreme or the other. So they are either trying too hard to be persuasive or to be professional, and in the process they're not being themselves, so they're appearing fake or phony, and that turns people off. Or you have people that completely trade off professionalism or the ability to influence and persuade other people for the sake of keeping it real, for the sake of being who they really are. So they start using foul language, they start cursing, they start talking erratically to people. And their answer to that always is, well, that's who I am by nature. But here's the thing. You got to realize that just because that's who you are by nature, the truth of the matter is that that's who you are in certain environments, because environment dictates behavior. Listen, when I'm hanging out with my friends in a bar having a couple of drinks, yes, I am cursing up a storm. But when I'm delivering a training to a customer or to a group of people, I'm going to refrain from using foul language for the sake of keeping it professional. The most important thing to me is that my message gets conveyed. Now, if you're in a market or in a situation, or you happen to deal with a target customer who appreciates foul language or appreciates that kind of stuff, then there's no problem using it. But the point is, if your goal is to be persuasive and actually convey your point effectively to the point that someone gives you money or agrees with you or just simply complies with you, you have to find that balance between who you really are and that level of professionalism or that level of effective persuasive communication, for lack of a better term. The second thing you got to do is you got to get skills. You have to skill yourself up. You have to level up your learning in terms of what it is that you're claiming to be an expert at, or what you want people to agree with you on in terms of your persuasive communication. Because let me tell you something, competence and confidence are directly intertwined with each other. So confidence is extremely important when you're communicating with somebody. If somebody senses that you're not confident, or you're not sure of yourself, or that you have a certain level of uncertainty, that turns them off, right? So you have to have a lot of confidence. And oftentimes people aren't confident because their competence level really isn't where it should be. So they're afraid that they might get asked a question that they don't know the answer to, or they're afraid that they're not going to be able to convey their point the right way, or they're afraid that there's something missing from their repertoire. And so that manifests itself in a form of lack of confidence. But the more you know about your subject matter, the more you invest in becoming an expert, the more confident you'll actually be. But aside from investing in your expertise on your subject matter, you have to invest in your ability to influence and persuade other people. You know, I've been studying this stuff for the past 20 years, researching, if that's what you want to call it. The fact of the matter is, when people ask me, how did I learn all this stuff? I just read a lot of books. I'm a guy who just read a lot of books. I probably read more books on influence, persuasion, human communication than you'll read in your entire life. In fact, there was a point where it's probably 2 or 3 years where those were the only type of books that I read. I made the decision to invest in myself. Once I decided that that's what I wanted to be a known expert in, that's what I committed myself to learning and mastering by simply reading about it. The third thing is, you have to become conscious of the unconscious. So let me explain what I mean by that. Oftentimes, when you communicate with somebody, you do things unconsciously that you're not consciously aware of. That's why they call it unconscious communication. So there's things that you do either with your words or with your body that you're not paying attention to, that are having an unconscious effect on the person that you're trying to influence or persuade. So it could be that you sway back and forth, and I have an issue with that. I injured my hip years ago, and so I keep most of my weight on my left hip. But sometimes it gets a little tired and I start going back and forth like this, and when I catch myself doing that, I immediately stop. And the reason why I stop is because I know that that's going to have an unconscious effect on the person watching me or listening to me. It's going to distract them from the message that I'm trying to get across to them. Vocal fillers. I see people do this all the time. I was guilty of it. I was probably the most guilty of anybody that I've ever met, where I was constantly saying, every time I made a presentation. In fact, some of the most world-renowned thought leaders and experts in any given field that I follow today, when I watch some of their presentations and I see the amount of vocal fillers that they use, they don't realize how much of a distraction that is on the people that are listening to them. It's completely destroying and cannibalizing their entire message. So you have to start to become conscious of the unconscious. You got to start to become conscious of what you're doing that's destroying your message without even realizing it. So remember, to recap, the 5 governing factors that will absolutely explode your ability to influence in other people when you master them, or if you don't pay attention to them, will put a cap on it or completely halt it, put the brakes on it, are your authenticity, your authority, your aptitude, your adaptive ability, and your articulative ability. Now, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, leave a comment, and make sure you subscribe.